Everyone. Right, I hope everybody's okay. If you've read my message, you know that's going to be the last class for this year. Just before we get into the real stuff, some introduction and not warning, but some explanation. So we're going to do with the third part of the lesson, which is about settling peace after war. Okay, so I will certainly use something like 1 hour ish, maybe a bit more, but maybe 1 hour and a quarter of an hour, and that should be okay for the end of this lesson. Three things as an introduction, and these are things that we also remind you of at the very end of this class. Firstly, I have received yesterday the official syllabus. It's not published yet, but it's now official. We have eventually, right, it's 25th or 26th of June, we have eventually the official syllabus for next year. There is absolutely no reduction or shortening or... I mean, there's nothing to... nothing is changing, right? I mean, it's the same ideas before in terms of density and mass of knowledge. So that's the first point. But now at least it's official, so we can really start working on this. Secondly, as I've told you, we will also I will also give you the major elements you need for the key terms and key issues that I will be evaluating you on for the mock orals at the beginning of next year. We need to plan this and prepare for this, whatever happens. So at the end of this class, I will do that. And I will send you a message to for those who would not attend this class, which I totally understand. Okay, that's it. Thirdly, there are three regarding this lesson. There are three elements you really need to remember for next year. Okay, so honestly, and I know that sounds like a teacher's speech and teacher's stance, but part 2 and part 3 in this lesson are absolutely necessary. I wouldn't say vital because we all know what vital means in our current days, but I mean it's quite crucial that you arrive in September. With a global knowledge and a global memory. Okay, not the detail possibly, but a global memory of part 2 and 3. Okay. So I will leave this in case you need this like in late August, right? All this lesson will be still available if you want to, like refresh memories when we start next year. And we need them because we really won't have the time to dig into this that much more. Okay? Right, so thanks for the people being behind the screen. And I hope everybody's doing well. I don't know if the chat is working or it's not actually. So if the chat is open, in case you have any question, please do not hesitate. That's it. Okay, so can just someone tell me? I'm sorry to ask this. Just say like maybe just an emoji or whatever, just to let me know if the chat is open, because I'm not sure it is actually, or that's it. So maybe I've chosen the wrong settings. I don't know. So just let me know. Of course, if the chat is not open, you won't be able to let me know. So anyway, right, you can send a text in case. Okay, so right. The first thing I want to insist on today is that, sorry, I'm just checking something just to make sure I'm... Okay, it's working, good. Okay, thank you so much, people. I'm sorry to ask this from you, but it's not to check who's behind the screen, right? I swear it's not the case, but Okay, thank you very much. That's fine. Good. So, let's now work on why we're together for. And that's the final part, and trying to give an assessment, not an assessment, but trying to focus on what was the impact, the long-lasting, short-term, middle-term, and long-term impact of World War One. And I had started during the last class on this, which is the human toll. Okay, and so I'm sorry, it's as little sexy as possible as the document, right? But I mean, at least it's very clear. This is the amount of casualties. This is the amount of casualties that resulted from World War One. And as you can see, there are three major things to be remembered. There are three major things to be remembered. Firstly, if you remember, we said World War I was a total war. And the first thing you have to bear in mind and to keep in mind is that it has affected as large an amount of men as ever. That is, there were never so many men enlisted in a war. If you look at the first column, the column on the left-hand side, you've got the country's name, and then you've got the total amount of mobilized people, mobilized men mostly, right? And if you look at this, I mean, look at the bottom line. 65 million people fought in this war. 65 million people, 65 million mobilized military. Of course, at that time, that was by far the largest amount of people ever mobilized in a war. Why am I mentioning this? Not just because the number in itself is impressive, like, 65 million of people fighting, but also because these people, most of them, they went back to civilian life once the war was over. And these massive amount of people, these tens of millions of people, they brought back their experience of the war into civilian society. That's something I've already explained when I've explained, the notion of brutalization. These men, these 65 million men, minus the victims, of course, minus the dead, but they went back to society, to normal life or civilian life, having undergone this mass experience of war, of the traumas of war, of the new levels of violence of war, of, getting, to some extent, getting accustomed, getting used to living in such a context. And so they had to readapt to societies later, and that's a point I will discuss in a few minutes. On these 65 million men that were enlisted in the war, or that were, forced to fight by their state, it is estimated that 8.5 million died. Historians are still discussing how many people died precisely in the war, but now we have something like 8.5 million men that died. And clearly, this would have a long-term demographic impact that I won't develop today, but for years and years, many countries had many more women than men in their population. Many more women than men. And in a country like France, where women were not necessarily financially autonomous, that created a problem, because being married at that time was not a matter of love. Being married was also, to some extent, a matter of, forming an economic union. And many women were not able, in France, for example, to find a husband because of the lack of men. That's it. that would have an economic impact on the financial situation of women and their capacity to be, autonomous financially. But that's another discussion. Moreover, more than 20 million people were wounded. Can you imagine that? That makes one fighter out of 3. One soldier out of 3 was wounded in the war. And if you remember what we did last time, wounded to some very serious extent, large extent, with their broken faces and undergoing surgery, reconstruction surgery, and so on. And so that's also an element you have to take into account, because many of these people were maimed, where they underwent amputations, they were mutilated, and so their economic reinsertion was difficult. Okay, so if you also count the prisoners, people who were prisoners during the war, people who were missing. Yeah, we know what it means. When you're missing in a war, you're dead. Okay? Look at this. It means that's the very last column, the one on the right. More than 1 soldier out of 2. More than 1 soldier out of 2 in the war was either killed, wounded, made prisoner, or disappeared. So died, certainly. Or was in jail and never released. That's the other possibility. It means that war has affected 37 million people, plus their families. Widows, women who had lost their husband, are not counted in this. Orphans, young kids, losing their parents in the war, their father in the war, or brothers or uncle, some kin, some relatives in the war, not included here. Actually, that's something you can remember. No one in countries like France, no one in a country like Germany, no one in a country like Austria, possibly no one in a country like the UK, was left unarmed from the war, was left without a personal consequence from the war, whether directly in their body, mutilation, broken faces, the psychic trauma, or by losing a member of their family or a neighbor of. Everyone was really affected, right? When you say it's a total war, it's also a total war because there was not a single person who was not affected to some point by the war. Okay? Right? So, some countries, as you can see, were many more affected. Were much more affected. Were much more affected. They had many more casualties, including these countries. You can remember actually 5 of them, right? Which is Russia, that pay a huge toll to the war, right? 1.7 million killed, and globally, as you can see, 3 soldiers out of 4 were affected in some ways by the war. France, 1.4 million, more or less, okay, of dead soldiers. The British Empire, 1 million, a bit less than 1 million soldiers. And in the Central Powers, you have Germany, which has as many deaths as Russia, 1.7, and 1.2 million for Austria. So these were the 5 countries with the heaviest human toll. Okay? Right. In this human toll, there is a category of people which have to be mentioned because they underwent a specific type of death and brutality. And this is the Armenian population. Okay. During the war, during the war, a specific population known as the Armenian. So you have a map. That's a map of, okay, let's say Turkey today. It's the map of the Middle East, of the northern Middle East. And it's globally centered on Turkey. So the map corresponds to the countries today. It's not a map from that time. It's not a map from that time, from 1915. It's a map regarding, using today's borders, today's boundaries. Okay. Okay. So if you look at this, there was a population which was called the Armenians, and the Armenians are Christians. It's important to remember this. They were a Christian population, but they were living in the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire was in majority a Muslim empire. Okay, it was a caliphate, so there was a sultan, right, who was ruling over this. And actually, for several decades, the Armenians had been victims of massacres by the Ottoman authorities. Okay, so the Ottoman authorities were trying to reduce the influence and the presence of the Armenian population in the Ottoman Empire. In 1915, these massacres took a different scale. The scale was enlarged because the Ottoman government decided to get rid of the Armenian population. And so there were orders given to massacre, slaughter, massively kill the Armenian population. How were they killed? If you look at the key, if you look at the legend key on the map, you can see that, sorry, I'm just going to close my window because someone is listening to music outside. And sorry, I'm back. So, how did that happen? The Ottoman authorities went to Armenian villages. And in these Armenian villages, two things happened. So, brutal images coming in case you're sensitive to this. So, okay, it's going to be images of massacre. So just to make sure you're okay with that. In case you're not okay, close your eyes. It's just coming. I'm going to let you know. So first image, it's coming. This is the first thing that happened in the Armenian villages. People were identified as Armenians and they were executed on location in their village or in their cities. Okay? And just to prove that, it was a known fact, right? Photos were taken. These are archives that come from the 1915 massacre, and this massacre would become a genocide. That is a planned massacre, a massacre that was decided by the state, that was implemented by the state, which was an official order to exterminate a specific population. And this population was the Armenians. Okay? Second things that happened, the Armenian population were forced to, sorry, I'm just looking for this, another picture. They were forced to march away from their villages. And you can see it on the map. If you look at the map first, before looking at the picture, you can see something like deserts and mountain routes where many Armenians died of starvation and exhaust. Okay, actually, they were forced by the Ottoman forces, either the army or the police or militias, to leave their villages, to leave Turkey. And actually they died from exhaustion and starvation. These were called death marches. And we've got images of this, so you can see that's a population, of just Armenians just being forced out of their villages and marching to exhaustion and just, dehydration, starvation, disease, whatever. Okay? Now, what is the amount of all this? So historians have now worked on this a lot. They've worked on this a lot, and they estimate that at least 700,000 Armenians were killed, were slaughtered, were exterminated by the Ottoman decision. The largest, if you go to the top estimation, it's 1 million. Sometimes you read 1.5 million. That's generally coming from the Armenian sources. Some Armenian sources that tend to have a larger estimation. But let's say between 700,000 and 1 million. But 700,000 is certainly closer to truth. And I would tend to say whatever. I mean, it's already, far too much. So when you consider the human toll, you have to consider that it was the first European genocide too. It was the genocide against the Armenians was the first genocide that took place in Europe. And you may know that Turkey today tends to deny. Turkey tends to deny that there ever was a genocide against the Armenian. And actually, I would like to show you a document to prove that even at that time, the genocide was well known. That the genocide was well known by many people. So 2 documents I would like to show you. First document, sorry, I'm just preparing it. The first document is, where is that? It's there. Sorry, it's not appearing, it's coming. This is from the New York Times. So as you know, the New York Times is a very famous American newspaper. And the New York Times has got an international audience, international lectorate. Okay, people from many places read the New York Times. And this is, look at this. This is from the 15th of December, 1915. 15th of December, 1915. So during the genocide, and this is what the article, the topic dealt with by the article. Million Armenians killed or in exile. The American Committee on Relief says victims of Turks are steadily increasing. And look at this policy of extermination. I mean, it was not hidden. It was publicly known. Just to tell you why it was publicly known, it's because at that time in the Ottoman Empire, in Turkey, you had many Christian missionaries. You know, a missionary is a person that tries to convert someone to Christianity. And there were many Protestant missionaries coming from the USA, which means that in Turkey you had plenty of American citizens that were, touring Turkey to promote Christianity, create schools, create missions, and so on. And so these people, they saw what was happening. They were witnessing that there was a genocide underway. And so they gave their testimonies once they were back in America, or they sent letters saying many Armenians are being killed. More atrocities detail in support of charge that Turkey is acting deliberately. Deliberately. This is how you define a genocide. Okay? Right. So I won't read the rest of the article, but just there is a reference to Abdul Hamid. Abdul Hamid was a sultan of Turkey at that time. He was the leader of Turkey, and he said, the massacres are the result of a deliberate plan of the Turkish government to get rid of the Armenian question, as Abdul Hamid once said, by getting rid of the Armenians. So there was clearly a plan to exterminate the Armenians. Okay? Right. So that also increased the amount of casualties. Finally, there's one last thing I'm not mentioning, but I'm sure you know it. In the aftermath of World War I, there was what is known as the Spanish flu, which was a massive flu influenza virus, and it is estimated to have killed at least 10 million people in Europe and certainly 20 million people in the world. And one reason why the flu was so deadly, why it killed so many people, is that populations were weakened after 4 years of war. Okay? If there are any questions on this, please do not hesitate to use the chat. Okay? So now, it was an unprecedented human toll, as I've told you on last Friday and explained you today. Now, at the end of the war, there was the defeat of Germany and their allies in, as you know, November 1918. On the 11th of November 1918, you had the Armistice, which was signed. And now it was time to start getting out of the war. And the aim was to make the war, if you look at the quotation marks, the war to end all wars. As the war had killed 10 million people, as the war had wounded 20 million people, as the situation of the world was very unstable, critical, how was it possible to get something positive from the war? And a way to get something positive from the war was to settle peace on a long term. And believe it or not, but there were some hopes after the war that maybe a lesson had been, learned from the war, that there was a good reason not to go to war again, and it was a failure. Spoiler, epic fail. Actually, not immediately. On a short term, a new conception of international relations was born. A conception which was more based on let's communicate, let's cooperate, let's have more, saner, safer, maybe more honest international relations. And this is what I'm going to explain to you in the second part, called The War to End All Wars. And I'm going to insist on three things. Wilson's 14 points. President Wilson was the American president. The peace conferences and their consequences, and why there was a hope that maybe peace could last. Okay? So, there was something I wanted to show you and I've forgotten. My bad. No, I will show it to you later. Forget about this. Right. I'm sorry, right? I'm just looking for. Okay, here we go. Um, in 1918, the American president, whose name was Woodrow Wilson, Thomas Woodrow Wilson, he delivered a speech that would certainly change the role of the USA in the world, even if not immediately, but on a long term. And a speech that would also have an influence on how World War I was ended and how peace was settled after. This speech is known as the 14 points. And folks, you have to know it. You have to know about the 14 points. Firstly, because for globally 1 century, these 14 points would kind of define the US attitude with the rest of the world and how the USA wanted to transform the world or reform the world in their views. And the impact was not immediate, but on the long term there would be an impact. Secondly, because these 14 points were some kind of basis for the type of international relation based on, countries communicating more and so on. What was it all about? So, the 14 points were publicly displayed during a speech delivered by President Wilson, the President of the United States, in January 1980. Remember, the war ended in November 1980. I mean, the war in Europe, the war with Germany notably, ended in November 1980. That was only a few months after the USA had declared war. I don't know if you remember this. The USA declared war in April 1970. Okay? Why is this speech interesting? Firstly, because he's talking in a joint session. And a joint session means that you've got all the people in the US Congress, so the people from the House of Representatives and the senators, so the elected representatives of the US people. So it's an American speech for an American audience. But for the first time, a US president said, we have a role to play in the world. What role? What role? Gentlemen of the Congress, we're just going to read this together. Gentlemen of the Congress, we entered this war because violations of right had occurred, which touched us to the quick, to the heart, if you want, which touched us immediately, and made the life of our own people impossible unless they were corrected, and the world secured once for all against their recurrence. In simple word, we entered the war because there was a threat on us, Germany, clearly. What we demand in this war, therefore, is nothing peculiar to ourselves. We, the USA, we want nothing. What we want is that the world be made fit and safe to live in. We want a safe world. We want to get rid of the insecurity of war. And particularly that the world be made safe for every peace-loving nation which, like our own, wishes to live its own life, determine its own institutions, be assured of justice and fair dealing by the other peoples of the world as against force and selfish aggression. If you read this, it reads really utopian. We want a world of peace. There are peace-loving nations. There are peace-loving nations, which is quite interesting to say in January 1918, where half of the world was fighting. So I would be very curious to learn who these peace-loving nations were. Apparently, the USA was. Okay. And so we want to live our own life. We want to be free. We want to choose our own institution because we're a democracy. The USA is a democracy. And that's it. Okay? So you can see that there was a hope. You remember I'm sorry to be a bit like, self-repeating, but hopes for lasting peace. Hopes for lasting peace. That's third part, paragraph 2. That's exactly what President Wilson wanted. We need to end the war. We need to finish the war. We need to win the war so we can implement lasting peace. We can implement a peace that will last maybe forever. Between free nations, between free countries, between peace-loving nations. And you know why I've told you it's a failure, because 20 years later you would have World War II. I mean, it was a failure. But not, can I say this differently? It's not because it was a failure. We know it was a failure now, but at that time there were real hopes for the war to be useful to something, like useful maybe to prevent people from going at war again. You know, something like never again. The war to end all wars. So, how can you reach this? Because that's just, a principle. We want peace. How do we get this? How do we get to this? How do we achieve peace? All the people of the world, third paragraph, right? All the peoples of the world are in effect partners in this interest. By definition, you can't make peace alone. You can't make peace alone. You know the proverb, maybe it takes two to tango. Now, if you want to dance with someone, it takes two. It takes two to make peace. And you make peace with your enemy. To make peace, your enemy becomes your partner. You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. And for our own part, we see very clearly that unless justice be done to others, it will not be done to us. And so, now, after the introduction, here come the 14 elements of peace settlement Wilson was trying to promote. The program of the world's peace. The programs of the world's peace, therefore, is our program. And that program, the only possible program, all we see it is this. Firstly, open covenants of peace must be arrived at. What does that mean? You just read the end of the first point. Diplomacy shall proceed always frankly and in the public view. To say differently, stop secret treaties. When diplomacy is done, it has to be done so that everybody knows what's happening, and that will help us see where the risks are, where the dangers are, where the tensions are, and so we can solve them. You know, it's like in any human relation. If you don't discuss things, there's one moment people get suspicious of each other, okay? Wilson said that's true for states. We need to discuss publicly. Spoiler, we need a place to do this. We need an institution to do this. We need an organization to do this. Discuss. And that would be the League of Nations. And today it's the United Nations. Secondly, absolute freedom of navigation upon the seas. Everybody should be able to use maritime areas to travel, to trade. There shouldn't be conflict on the seas. No sea war, no maritime war. The removal, so far as possible, of all economic barriers and the establishment of an equality of trade conditions. Let's all trade together. Let's have a liberal world of free trade and so on. Very American, right? Very compatible with the American conception. Armaments, point 4. Adequate guarantees given and taken that national armaments should be reduced to the lowest points consistent with domestic safety. In simple words, all countries should have as few weapons, as little armament as possible. We should disarm. We should reduce drastically, we should reduce massively the amount of weapons that a country owns. Why? Because the more weapons you have, the more likely you are, the likelier you are to use them. So weapons should be had, armies should be kept, military structures should be maintained just for your own defense. All states should reduce armament. A free, open-minded, absolutely impartial adjustment of colonial claims. And look at this. The interest of the population in the colonies must have equal weight with the equitable claims of the government whose title is to be determined. What does that mean? People from the colonies should be given the right to determine what they want to be. Can you imagine how revolutionary this might have sounded at a time when France, the UK, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany before, had colonized all of Africa, with very few exceptions, all of Africa, and most of Asia. And the USA said, no, that can't last. To settle peace, we need to solve the colonial trouble. It was a failure at that time. On the long term, it was more efficient. And then, of course, the Russian territory should be evacuated. Belgium should be evacuated by foreign armies. The French territory should be freed. Germany should give back Alsace-Lorraine to France. Okay. A readjustment of the frontiers of Italy to enable the Italians to live all together, along clearly recognizable lines of nationality. So Italy for Italians. The peoples of Austria-Hungary should be accorded the freest opportunity of autonomous development. If you're a Czech, you should have a Czech country. If you're a Slovak, you should have a Slovakian country. If you're a Serbian, you should have not a Serbian. If you're a Croatian, you should have a Croatia, and so on. Romania, Serbia, Montenegro should be evacuated. Serbia should be accorded free and secure access to the sea. Okay. The Turkish portion of the present Ottoman Empire should be assured sovereignty. You should have a Turkey, but the other nationality which are now under Turkish rule should be assured security and autonomous development. So people living under the Turkish domination should be able to choose their future. An independent Poland should be erected. So what does that mean? Nations. I hope now you know what a nation is. It's an imagined community of people, maybe, but that want to share a common history and common destiny. Wilson said we should give the nations of Europe, we should give the communities of Europe, to some extent, the right to choose their country and to choose their forms of government. That's for Europe. For the rest of the world, free circulation, free navigation, free trade, public diplomacy. This would be the basis this would be the American basis for reconstructing the world after World War I. And I don't know if you can see this. For once, listen carefully because that won't happen much. I won't be cynical. If you look at the whole list of this, it means that globally, the basic principle to reconstruct post-World War I Europe and world would be democracy, would be the capacity for people to choose their form of government, and would be a freedom of movement all over the earth. That's some kind of utopia. That's the liberal utopia. This is what liberalism is about, freedom of movement, freedom of trade, freedom of political choice, freedom of association between countries to discuss frankly and publicly. Okay? Yep. Right. In reality, what happened? In reality, what happened is that it was not as simple as this. I'm sure you knew this already. Okay, let me show you a few maps. Firstly, you know why he said Russia should be evacuated? Because at that time, since November 1917, so 2 months before Wilson's speech on the 14 points, 2 months before, the Russian Civil War had started. And a Russian Civil War which is the direct consequence of the Bolshevik Revolution. So I've decided not to explain the Bolshevik Revolution because Monsieur Heropoulos will certainly include this in his lesson about totalitarian regimes next year. Okay. But you see all the zone in red? All the zone in red is where the civil war in Russia was taking place. And look, if you look at the margins, okay, can you look at the margins, the boundaries of the areas? You can see at the top, British, US, and French intervention. You can look at the bottom, the Turkish and British intervention, because the Russian Civil War was also a war where the foreign countries sent troops, and globally they sent troops against the Bolsheviks, against Lenin, against the communists. They supported the Tsarist army, the royalist army. But as you know, the royalist army eventually lost the war. The communists won in 1921. And they created a new state, which would become a communist state, known as the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, the USSR. So it means that immediately after the First World War in Russia, immediately after Russia got out of the war in 1918, then there was the Civil War in Russia. Okay? So it means that actually the hopes for peace were immediately broken in Russia. And as you can see, the British, the US, the French, they participated to the war going on in Russia. That's one example. Second example of what happened. How New Europe was drawn. How New Europe was drawn. So firstly, this is how Austria-Hungary, the Empire of Austria-Hungary, was divided. So, if you look at the map, you can see that what's in the center is the former Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Okay? Then it was split. Czechoslovakia was created. A part of Austria was given to Poland. a state called Austria was created. But also, if you look at this, Italy got some territories from Austria. So what does that mean? The Austrian Empire was totally dismantled. Okay? Everything which is not yellow on the map, everything which is not yellow on the map used to be the Austrian Empire. Then it was totally split between Poland, Czechoslovakia, Austria, Hungary, Romania, Croatia, Italy. This corresponded to Wilson's view. The peoples in Central Europe should choose their own form of government. So if you were Polish and you wanted to live in Poland, so be it. If you were Czech and you wanted to live in your country, then so be it with Czechoslovakia. Okay? Right? So it means that the borders of Europe were totally transformed. And I give you a more general view of all this. This is Europe in 1923. And as you can see, I can see answers. So yes, Kenzo, the man who opposed Wilson was the senator called Henry Cabot Lodge. He was in charge of the foreign policy in the U.S. Senate, because the U.S. Senate is the place where you discuss foreign policy, because the U.S. Senate can ratify treaties. The U.S. Senate can sign and ratify the treaties for the USA. And there was a man called Henry Cabot Lodge, and he said, absolutely, he said, I will defend the independence of the USA. So he opposed Wilson. The treaty that divided the Austrian Empire was called the Traité du Trianon. Okay, and it was signed, the Traité de Versailles, which was about Germany, and Traité du Trianon was about the Austrian Empire. So look at this. That's a brand new Europe. A brand new Europe. Countries that did not exist before were now existing. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia. But also, if you look south of it, the mandate of Syria, Lebanon, that used to belong to the Ottoman Empire, had now been created. Iraq, which was a British mandate under British administration, was created. Okay, you're welcome, Kenzo. My pleasure. So that's it. A brand new Europe. But actually, this would create as many problems as it solved. Why? Because in the new Romania, which was created, can you look at Romania again? Maybe I should show you the other one. If you look at Romania, especially the region known as Transylvania, you can see Transylvania on the. You see Transylvania. It's in the west of Romania. It's known for being the original land of Vlad Dracula and the myth of Dracula, right? Dracula was coming from the Transylvanian region. Anyway, Transylvania went to Romania, but in Transylvania, you had Hungarian people. And these Hungarian people, they were not asked if they wanted to live in Hungary. So when Wilson said people in Central Europe should be able to choose their country of residence and and their nation, it was true for most of the Hungarians, but not from the Hungarians living in Croatia, not for the Hungarians living in Romania. Okay? And so, even today, you still have an important Hungarian minority. I think it's 500,000 people, possibly, living in Romania. and speaking Romanians, but also speaking Hungarian, the Hungarian language. Okay, so that's just one example. Another example, in Czechoslovakia, you had many German-speaking people. German-speaking people, and these German-speaking people, they lived in a place called Sudetenland, and this land would be one of the land that Hitler would take back in 1938. Okay? Right? Good. So, solutions found to solve the problems that created the war, the problems of nationalities that's created the war, partly. But, when you draw a line somewhere to create a new state, especially in Europe, especially in Central Europe, you can never make a clear line. Never. Never. And this would create new tensions in the 1920s and in the 1930s. Okay? One country which was badly affected by this was the Ottoman Empire and Turkey. And I'm going just to conclude on this. Sorry, I'm just looking for the map. Where is that map? It's there. Okay. This is how the Ottoman Empire was totally dismantled. Okay, and it was dismantled for three reasons mostly. The first reason is that it was defeated. So as it was defeated, sorry, I'm just enlarging the map. I forgot to do that. I moved it to enlarge it, and I have to zoom in. Sorry. Okay, here we go. It was divided firstly because the Ottoman Empire was defeated. It also was divided because, as you can see at the bottom of the map, the French and the British took advantage of the situation to get some formerly Turkish-dominated territories. I've already mentioned Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. French mandate, British mandate. But what happened is that there was an internal revolt. There was an internal revolt in Turkey, and a man that would become Mustafa. He was called Mustafa Kemal. He would become the next leader of Turkey, right? Atatürk. He made a civil war, and this civil war led to Turkey becoming much larger than was originally planned. If I compare, I'm sorry, I can't move the map anymore. Okay. Have you seen what Turkey should have been? Maybe I'm wrong, but I think Turkey should have been reduced to the green part. I hope it's green, actually, the part where you've got Ankara and so on. I hope it's green. I can't see the color specifically. So I think it's green anyway. It was much reduced. I mean, Turkey was really a dwarf state. It was a state with a very, very tiny one compared to the Ottoman Empire. And there was a rebellion and there was a new war in Turkey. Look at this. This is Turkey in green in 1920. And this would be Turkey in 1923. Look at this. Turkey had managed to gain back some territory with a new war. If you can't remember all this, just remember one thing. In Turkey, the war lasted up to 1923. 1923. Actually, we all bear in mind that the war lasted, and what was over in 1918 or 1919 with the Treaty of Versailles. Actually, for Turkey, it was 1923. 1923. Okay? Right. So, I'm going to conclude on the second part and very quickly go to the last part about the memories of the war. And these memories of the war, they deeply... Oh, maybe you're surprised I'm not talking about Germany more than this with the Treaty of Versailles and so on. There is a very good reason for this. I will mention the Treaty of Versailles next year in my first lesson about the 1929 crisis and the Great Depression, because there is a link between the Depression and the Treaty of Versailles. So I'm leaving the Treaty of Versailles for next year. Don't worry, there will be something about it. You know the major elements from the Treaty of Versailles, I'm sure. Germany had to give Alsace-Lorraine back to the French. They had to give a large part of their territory to Poland. They had to pay huge reparation in money to other countries, and Germany was said guilty of the war. The Treaty of Versailles say Germany was guilty of the war, so they have to pay for this. Okay? So, in the next 5 minutes, as a conclusion on this, memories of the war deeply affected the European and overseas societies. Just 3 documents to prove you this. Firstly, in many countries, but in France mostly, the war was remembered by war monuments, war memorials. War memorials. This one is in Limousin, in La Creuse, a magnificent department. I really like it, actually. And it's on a town today which is called Jontiou-Pigerolles. And it's very well known for a war memorial, which is a pacifist one, as you can see. Cursed, that war be cursed. Okay, maudite soit la guerre. And so, as you certainly know, these war memorials were erected and built in almost all the villages in France and cities in France. In the 1920s, you would have thousands of these war memorials being erected. So one like Maudite soit la guerre. I show you another one, which is this one. This one is near Lyon. Contre la guerre, à ses victimes, à la fraternité des peuples. So you can see that this is another, and you can see a widow and an orphan kid, you know, that are mourning the dead. So you could say, oh, people seem to be very pacifist apparently, because these monuments, these memorials are about, you know, rejecting war and so on. The reason why I'm showing you these memorials is because actually there are very few of them. Most memorials were more about how the French accepted to sacrifice themselves for the war. And one very famous place that you can still go to today and visit today, and that's a very impressive place, is there. It's called La Nécropole Nationale de Notre-Dame de Lorette. So a necropolis is a place where you bury people. It's a mass cemetery. It's a mass cemetery, especially military cemetery. So you can see there is a church, okay, and there is a huge monument to pay tribute to the dead of World War I. But it's a monument to pay homage to how it's respectable to sacrifice yourself for your country. And 1 century later, or more than 1 century later, this monument is still highly visited, and the memory of the war is still highly visited today. Okay, this monument has got, if I'm not wrong, more than 500,000 people coming to visit it every year. And it's next to Lens. What I mean is that it's not the most attractive, you know, city in France, but you've got 500,000 people coming there to see this, you know, mass military cemetery. I would like to show you another document to prove how long the memories of the war lasted. And that's my last document for this. Et je vais passer en français. Je vais passer en français parce que c'est le lien avec... voilà, je termine, c'est ma conclusion. hein, de la leçon. Et ma conclusion de la leçon, pour faire le lien avec le programme de l'an prochain. Les mémoires de la guerre, évidemment, ce sont aussi des mémoires de la guerre. Je regarde juste si je suis pas en train de... Je regarde s'il y a des messages ou pas, parce que comme je suis... comme j'ai perdu le chat, donc je ne sais pas si vous êtes toujours là ou pas, en fait. Excusez-moi, je regarde vite fait. Vous êtes toujours là. Je suis pas surpris que ce soit plutôt orange que vert, mais voilà. Donc ça m'étonne pas. C'était l'un ou l'autre. Merci Kenzo. Alors, connaissez tous le maréchal Pétain, tous et toutes le maréchal Pétain, donc je vais pas revenir dessus. C'est le moment où le maréchal Pétain, au moment où l'Allemagne donc a envahi la France, hein, depuis le 10 mai 1940, et les armées françaises sont en difficulté, et le maréchal Pétain propose un armistice aux Allemands. Et il prend la parole en tant que chef du gouvernement français, donc le 17 juin 1940. Bon, vous savez que le lendemain, De Gaulle va refuser cet armistice, c'est l'appel du 18 juin, mais ce qui m'intéresse, regardez, c'est quoi ? C'est l'appel qui est lancé à la radio par le maréchal Pétain qui dit quoi ? Français, à l'appel de Monsieur le Président de la République, j'assume à partir d'aujourd'hui la direction du gouvernement de la France. Donc il devient ce qu'on appelle président du Conseil, chef du gouvernement. Sûr de l'affection de notre admirable armée, l'affection de notre armée, parce qu'il était général pendant la Première Guerre mondiale, c'est le général qui a gagné Verdun dans la mémoire populaire. Il est le vainqueur de Verdun dans la mémoire populaire, le général Pétain devenu maréchal. Et regardez, avec un héroïsme digne de ses longues traditions militaires, sûr que par sa magnifique résistance, elle a rempli nos devoirs vis-à-vis de nos alliés, et regardez la dernière phrase que je voulais vous lire, sûr, dit Pétain, je suis sûr de l'appui des anciens combattants que j'ai eu la fierté de commander, je suis sûr de la confiance du peuple tout entier, je fais à la France le don de ma personne pour atténuer son malheur. Le 17 juin 1940, ce qui fait que Pétain pense, et il a raison de le penser, qu'il a l'appui des Français, c'est qu'il est un général toujours entouré de sa gloire de la Première Guerre mondiale. Et regardez la phrase, je suis sûr de l'appui des anciens combattants, parce que les anciens combattants de la Première Guerre mondiale avaient gardé une influence importante dans la société française. Et donc Pétain dit, si les anciens combattants me font confiance, ces gens qui ont sauvé la France, qui nous ont permis de gagner en 1918, qui se sont sacrifiés, alors ceux qui se sont sacrifiés ne sont plus là, mais certains sont encore là, mutilés, la gueule cassée, ils ont souffert, ces gens-là me soutiennent. Donc faites-moi confiance. Et donc ça prouve que 20 ans après, la mémoire de la guerre, évidemment, elle permet de comprendre aussi l'attitude des Français dans la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Et puis je vous montre mon dernier document, et je vous assure qu'ensuite, j'ai terminé. Ça, c'est un document... qui est toujours très intéressant. Je vous ai parlé tout à l'heure du génocide arménien. Pour vous montrer l'impact du génocide arménien quand même. Alors, ouais, c'est en anglais, mais peu importe. Donc, c'est un historien arménien qui a écrit, Kevork Barnakjian. Et voilà ce qu'il trouve dans les écrits de Hitler. Ça date du 22 août 1939. Je vous rappelle que la Pologne sera envahie finalement le 1er septembre 1939. Donc Hitler parle une semaine avant d'envahir la Pologne. Et là, il s'adresse aux SS. C'est un discours qui est devant les SS, donc la milice nazie, les troupes d'élite nazies. Et qu'est-ce qu'il leur dit ? Ma décision d'attaquer la Pologne, donc je l'ai prise à l'automne dernier. Et en gros, il explique que il va tout détruire. Il explique qu'il va tout détruire en Pologne, d'accord ? Et qu'il va être extrêmement brutal. Et regardez le dernier paragraphe. J'ai donné l'ordre que nos buts de guerre, ce ne soit pas de conquérir des territoires, reaching certain lines, donc atteindre certains endroits du territoire, mais la destruction physique de l'ennemi. Le but de la guerre de l'Allemagne nazie, c'est de détruire l'ennemi. C'est pas de gagner des territoires. D'accord ? Et pourquoi il parle aux SS ? Parce qu'il leur dit, c'est vous mes troupes d'élite, regardez, j'ai placé mes formations d'élite, des formations qui donnent la mort, d'accord ? Avec des ordres, pour envoyer à la mort sans aucune pitié et sans aucune compassion, des hommes, des femmes et des enfants polonais. Nous avons besoin de gagner l'espace vital nécessaire à la race allemande, Et regardez comment il termine. Enfin, il termine pas, mais l'extrait se termine comme ça. Après tout, aujourd'hui, qui se souvient de l'annihilation, de l'extermination des Arméniens? Ça veut dire que non seulement le génocide arménien, il était déjà dans les mémoires dans les années 40, il était présent, mais il sert de modèle politique à Hitler pour dire, bah regardez, les Turcs ont bien réussi à massacrer 1 million d'Arméniens, pourquoi nous on n'y arriverait pas? C'est ça notre modèle. Et donc ça veut dire que toute la Première Guerre mondiale, évidemment, elle a une mémoire qui se poursuit, y compris dans la conception de ce qu'est la guerre. C'est-à-dire que la guerre, c'est plus juste gagner des territoires. La guerre, ça peut être détruire l'ennemi. C'est pas du tout la définition de la guerre qu'il y avait au 19e siècle. Au 19e siècle, la définition de la guerre, c'est tu fais voilà, Napoléon, genre tu conquiers un territoire, après il est à toi, quoi. Là, ça devient tu conquiers un territoire, tu détruis la population qu'il y a dessus, et ce territoire est à toi. Il devient ce qu'on appelle un espace vital. Mais tu détruis. Le but de la guerre, c'est de détruire les gens qui vivent dessus. Et là, du coup, bah voilà, je vais m'arrêter là, puisque c'est la Seconde Guerre mondiale, qui devient donc une guerre d'extermination. Dès le départ. Dès le départ, la Seconde Guerre mondiale va être une guerre d'extermination contre les Juifs, contre les Polonais, contre les Slaves, et puis dans d'autres régions du monde, quand le Japon envahit la Chine, dans la guerre entre les Allemands et les Russes, etc. etc., etc. D'accord ? Voilà ce que je tenais à vous dire sur cette leçon. En sachant donc que je m'arrête et je dis 2-3 mots si vous le voulez bien, mais je ne vais pas non plus vous prendre trop longtemps. Je vais plutôt vous envoyer un message un peu long, un peu détaillé pour vous expliquer ça. Nous avions parlé ensemble de l'absolue nécessité de faire des euros blancs rapidement à la rentrée. Je maintiens, je vous le dis, je maintiens ma certitude que quelles que soient les conditions dans lesquelles nous aurons de l'enseignement l'an prochain, il ne se passera pas la même chose que cette année, c'est-à-dire l'annulation des examens. Voilà. Et alors pour Cambridge, j'en suis quasiment certain. Cambridge travaille déjà à des oraux à distance, par exemple. Donc on va être très clair. Il y aura des modalités d'examen l'an prochain qui vous obligent à préparer l'oral. Donc je redis ce que je vous ai déjà dit et que vous savez, et qui est une règle que vous avez a priori acceptée en rentrant en OIB. Il faut se préparer à l'oral. D'accord ? Donc, je vais vous envoyer, je l'enverrai de 2 façons, je le mettrai en message pronote, je l'enverrai par Moodle, voilà. Faites en sorte d'être sûr que tout le monde l'ait bien reçu. Si vous avez un doute, vous faites circuler sur groupe, etc. Je vais donc vous faire des oraux fin septembre sur 2 leçons. Donc, la Grande Dépression, ils appellent ça la crise de 29, mais c'est pourri comme appellation. La dépression des années 30, d'accord, et ses conséquences. Ça, ce sera la première leçon d'histoire de l'année, d'accord. Ses conséquences aussi sur les relations internationales, etc., etc. Je n'inclus rien sur le totalitarisme pour une raison simple, que vous comprendrez très vite. C'est comme c'est Monsieur Héropoulos qui va faire le totalitarisme, j'ai comme un petit doute sur le fait que fin septembre... ce soit disponible pour des euros blancs, vous vous en doutez. Donc évidemment, on prendra que ça. Donc ça veut dire que moi, très clairement, je vais là, dans les jours qui viennent, je vais taper ce cours-là. D'accord ? Et je vais vous donner le key term et la key issue associée. Je ne l'ai pas encore défini, je verrai. Voilà. Bon. Même chose pour la géographie, ce sera sur la mer et les océans. J'ai un poly qui est quasiment prêt. Ce que j'ai à faire, en fait, c'est à le traduire, parce que globalement, je l'ai plutôt constitué pour l'instant avec des documents, enfin, avec une construction à la française. Je vais le taper. Ça, début juillet, ce sera prêt. Je vous l'enverrai en PDF. Ce ne sera pas sur Moodle. Hein. Je vous enverrai un message avec PDF, etc. Donc voilà, je le mettrai aussi sur Moodle après, mais Moodle, vous n'y aurez pas accès pendant les vacances. Donc je vais mettre tout ça avant le 10 juillet, pendant que Moodle fonctionne. Je ne vous demande pas de travailler ça pendant les vacances, d'accord ? Mais peut-être que fin août, d'accord ? Ce serait cool que vous commenciez à regarder un peu à quoi ça ressemble. Parce que moi, ensuite, ces 2 leçons-là, je vais les faire en début d'année. Donc, en gros, la dépression de 29, ce sera mes 2 premières semaines. Et puis, mer et océan, ce sera mes 2 semaines d'après. Je m'engage à faire des cours en début d'année qui soient des cours carrés pour qu'on puisse faire les oraux. Et les oraux, ils auront lieu entre la fin septembre et début octobre. OK ? Le calendrier des oraux, je vous le donnerai qu'à la rentrée, une fois qu'on aura les emplois du temps. Je ne peux pas vous envoyer un calendrier maintenant. Mais sachez ça, entre la fin septembre et début octobre, peut-être un peu décalé, mais pas plus à mon avis, voilà. On va dire première semaine d'octobre maximum, vous serez passé à l'oral. Donc, il faudra travailler ça. Donc, si vous voulez commencer à les travailler avant, voilà. Mais je vous le dis tout de suite, me demandez pas fin septembre de redécaler, etc. Parce qu'il faudra vraiment qu'on avance et que vous ayez pu faire ça rapidement. Ok ? Donc, je taperai des fiches. Je vais faire ça, de toute façon les cours sont quasiment terminés maintenant. Je taperai les fiches sur mer et océan, je vous enverrai le programme, on est en train de se répartir le programme avec mon collègue. Je vous enverrai ça pour que vous ayez aussi une petite répartition. Donc voilà. D'accord ? Est-ce qu'il y a des questions sur ça ou pas ? Il va falloir que je vous laisse parce que... Voilà, parce qu'il faut que je vous laisse. C'est l'heure. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions sur ça ou pas, ou ça va ? Bon, il se peut que j'en croise certains d'entre vous lundi matin, parce que à 10h, je passerai peut-être, j'ai une réunion à 9h, mais si vous êtes en demi-groupe avec Monsieur Verret, je passerai peut-être faire un petit coucou, puisque vous serez peut-être au lycée. Je ne sais pas si vous viendrez ou pas lundi. A priori, vous êtes censé venir. Donc voilà. Tout ce que tu peux utiliser, Kenzo, sera bon, mais tu te doutes bien que donc pour mer et océan, si on met les cours d'HGGSP... Très clairement, ça crée un déséquilibre entre ceux qui font l'aspect et ceux qui la font pas, ceux et celles qui ne la font pas. Maintenant, jusqu'à preuve du contraire, personne n'est jamais pénalisé pour en savoir plus, mais tu verras qu'une partie de la leçon sur mer et océan est en lien avec ça. Donc oui, tu peux. Voilà. Tu peux déjà relire ça, effectivement, sans souci. Si vous avez gardé, je sais pas si vous avez gardé vos manuels ou pas, mais puis sinon tu utilises son cours, il n'y a pas de souci, ouais, ça peut tout à fait être utilisé. D'accord ? Voilà. Je ne sais pas s'il y a d'autres questions ou pas. Pour ma part, j'en ai donc terminé pour cette année, sauf pour celles et ceux que je reverrai, puisque vendredi matin prochain, je suis en réunion, et puis lundi aussi, donc voilà. Bah écoutez, merci beaucoup d'avoir encore été là aujourd'hui, voilà. Et puis je vous souhaite d'excellentes vacances, portez-vous bien, reposez-vous vraiment quoi. Faites un break aussi en fait, genre la vraie vie quoi, les vacances, tout ça, rien foutre, ouais, les trucs des vacances quoi. Ça fait du bien et contrairement à ce que plein de gens pensent, vous avez travaillé beaucoup cette année. Je pense que vous avez même peut-être plus travaillé d'une certaine façon, en tout cas d'une manière plus stressante à mon avis que normalement, donc vous avez besoin de vous reposer. Donc je vous souhaite vraiment le meilleur pour vos vacances. Prenez soin de vous. Et puis que je vous retrouve en pleine forme en septembre. On a pas mal de choses à faire ensemble qui vont être sympas quand même, mais qui vont être intenses. Allez, je vous souhaite une très bonne journée, un très bon week-end, de très bonnes vacances. Merci pour cette année. Et puis à l'an prochain. Et take great care